lawyer's plans to offer expert testimony about a mental disease, defect, or condition that has bearing on his guilt or innocence.
I don't think he's insane or mentally disturbed in any way. I just think he's a highly intelligent young boy.
But the defense argued in a forensic psychiatric report that Carneal wanted more respect from his classmates.
Kids want to feel important. And what's true about nearly every case of a schoolyard sniper is that they don't feel important in their lives. Their self-esteem has been assaulted. They don't feel good about themselves.
The psychiatric report diagnosed Carneal with chronic depression, but it added that he knew right from wrong and could have restrained himself.
These are not generally psychotic children. They're not kids who are totally out of touch with reality, or kids who are hallucinating or suffering from paranoid delusions.
Tried as an adult, Carneal was sentenced to 25 years in prison without parole, the maximum penalty. The tough penalties, though, seem to have little impact on the growing number of schoolhouse shootings. That story when the 20th century resumes.
He entered the school cafeteria through a side door, pulled out a rifle and a pistol from beneath his trench coat, and he fired more than 50 times.
He was just spraying gunfire.
Rapidly, one shot after another, or?
It was boom, 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 boom.
When it was over, 2 students were killed and 22 wounded.
You don't make sense out of this. There is no sense to it.
Wrestling coach Gary Bounden helped subdue the gunman. One of his wrestlers tackled Kinkle despite being shot himself.
Investigators said Kinkle got the semi-automatic rifle and 2 handguns from his home.
His mother's on the way to the hospital. I should find out it's Josh.
Okay. What I'd like you to do for me is right over there.
Parents could do little about it, but stand and wonder how this could happen, especially since Kinkle had been arrested just yesterday for bringing a gun to school.
And he told people he was going to do something. I mean, why they let him out, I can't believe this.
Kinkle was arrested and charged with 4 counts of murder.
Friends say the skinny, freckled youngster had a fascination with guns and bombs and occasional flashes of temper.
If he didn't think you were cool, he'd torment you.
2 days after the shooting, people still filed by the murder scene to look and to remember.
It could have happened to me. It could have happened to any of my friends. It could have happened to anybody.
You don't know who's going to bring a gun to school next, so it's really scared.
The spate of shootings across the country frightened many school officials into taking steps to try to prevent a shooting at their school. That story when the 20th century returns.
We usually only see in retrospect.
The problem was that schools failed to curb one of the major causes of kids' anger.
And my experience is that schools have just turned their back on the whole bullying issue. Either they refuse to see it, or they think, oh, that's just being a normal teenager, or they see it and they don't know what to do about it.
This is algebra, people.
Another classroom warning sign, a fascination with violence and murder that showed up in schoolwork. For example, Barry Loukaitis, the 14-year-old triple murderer in Moses Lake, Washington, wrote violent poems that he kept in his 9th grade English notebook.
I've seen many cases where kids have written terrible essays about murder and violence and handed them in to teachers, and the teachers have not taken this as any kind of warning signal, but seen it as typical adolescence. That's not true.
Nor was it typical, said the experts, for kids to have spent a lot of time focused on violence.
When you see a child whose life is focused around violent media, that tells you that this is a child who may be likely to act out violently. And it's a warning sign that this is a kid who needs intervention.
When Loukaitis walked into his algebra class that day in 1996, police said he had dressed in black and carried his rifle like an actor in the movie Fistful of Dollars, which Loukaitis had left cued to a murder scene in his home VCR.
And repeated exposure to violence alters our threshold as to what is an acceptable level of violence. And kids tend to become desensitized to it. They want more and more. It ups the ante. They require more to get that sense of excitement.
We do know there's a connection between what one sees and what one does. The $64,000 question is always which came first, Are they violent because they view it? Or do they like to view violence because they're violent tendencies anyway?
Now you're off the hook. So it was a mistake, Fox said, to blame it all on the media.
So it's very tempting to look for scapegoats and to blame literature and television. That's a small part of the problem. We're still talking about kids who know what they're doing and deliberately choose to get even.
In addition, experts said children who had violent tendencies also seemed to want to talk about it. That was a warning sign in Jonesboro, Arkansas, where 13-year-old Mitchell Johnson told his classmates that he had a lot of killing to do the day before he opened fire.
In every one of these cases, the other kids in the school could have told you ahead of time that this was the youngster who was most likely to act out, who was going to commit this kind of crimes.
So often in these school violence cases, some kids had an inkling it was coming. There were warning signs, but nobody dared squeal. There was this terrific pact of silence, loyalty to their friends.
Warning signs aside, the experts said the major problem with violent children were their parents.
There's been a tremendous withdrawal of adults in the lives of kids. There's been a disinvestment in youth in this country.
I think a big part of the problem of juvenile violence in this country is a failure of parents.
Hits that were produced prior to the would-be invasion of Great Britain, in which the Germans produced an arrest list of all the leading members of British society that would be captured. Now, this book is called the Black Book, and amongst these is a breakdown of British intelligence, and this is pretty full of information that is specified as coming from Best and Stevens. British intelligence was very, very fearful in their contacts with the German resistance as a whole, but German intelligence in particular, that they were going to be confronted with another Venlo incident.
The rivalry between the SD and the Abwehr, and Heydrich and Canaris in particular, served to send mixed signals to the Western powers. But even if an Allied connection had been made with the Abwehr, there was still little support in Germany for an armed rebellion.
Remember, there was no major armed opposition in Germany. There were no partisans here. There would have been no possibility of political support for such a thing. In my opinion, the British Secret Service did the only reasonable thing possible. It listened to the German opposition. It attempted to ascertain its strengths, but it only would have come to a greater loss of German blood had the British Secret Service stepped up its support for the German opposition.
They have been specially trained to face death with unflinching confidence. Trace the combat traditions of the original Green Berets, those who were chosen to fly the ball, the Army's Lightning Quick Strike Forces, the world's ultimate defense troops on tour of Duty Week. All this week at 9 p.m. on the History Channel.
The History Channel is proud to present on home video the best of Sworn to Secrecy. Take an inside look at some of this century's most subversive military operations. Call 1-800-708-1776. And for $79.95 plus shipping and handling, receive the 5-episode set, Sworn to Secrecy.
Mrs. Lindsay. William?
Hello, Stephen.
You're not by any chance computer shopping, are you?
Mm-hmm. If I can get some help.
Well, right now, you can get a complete Dell system with an Intel Pentium 3 processor, plus all of this for just $7.99.
Really?
She's intrigued. Excellent. Because right now, it comes with your choice of a free CD burner or DVD upgrade. And as far as service and support, Dell's won more awards than any other PC company in the last 5 years. It's real easy. Just call or go online. Tell them what you want, and right to your front door comes America's favorite PC.
Thanks, Stephen.
Now you can get a Dell desktop with an Intel Pentium 3 processor and 6 months of America Online Internet service for just $7.99. Call or go online today and get a free CD burner or DVD upgrade. There's great deals on notebooks, too.
Dude, you're getting a Dell.
Easy to buy, easy to own, easy as Dell.
Painting a room is...
Hello, my name is Estelle Ward, and I'd like to speak to someone about my daughter Ruth's financial aid. Hello, yes. I'm Ruth Ward's mom, and I was hoping the university might reconsider. She got good grades. Hello, I'm Ruth Ward's mother, and I'd like to speak to someone about my daughter's financial aid.
Stone Cold Steve Austin, 4-time WWF champion.
My name is Stone Cold Steve Austin.
Commander of the ring, controller of his fate, master of his destiny, vulnerable in the fight for his sanity.
Austin has snapped. He is a sick human being.
Sometimes the greatest battles rage within. WWF Unforgiven, presented live by Clearasil, Sunday, September 23rd on in-demand pay-per-view from AT&T Broadband.
A breed apart. From the Revolutionary War to World War II to Kosovo, they have been specially trained to face death with unflinching confidence. Trace the combat traditions of the original Green Berets, those who were chosen to fly the ball, the Army's Lightning Quick Strike Forces, the world's ultimate defense troops. Sign up for the military's most dangerous missions on Tour of Duty Week. Tonight at 9 on the History Channel.
On May 20th, 1937, at Spithead on the English south coast, a naval review was held to celebrate the coronation of King George VI. The might of Britain's Royal Navy, still the largest fleet in the world, was on display. There were representative warships of foreign navies, including a German ship, the pocket battleship Admiral Graf Spee. Little did anyone who was present that day know that 2.5 years later, she would be scuttled by her crew after an action against 3 British cruisers. Her captain would blunder by engaging hostile warships against orders and then allow himself to be trapped with no means of escape. Built in October 1932 before Hitler came to power in Germany, Graf Spee and her sister ships Deutschland and Admiral Scheer were called armored ships by the Germans, but were better known as pocket battleships. They were designed to ravage maritime trade routes. Their 6 11-inch gun main armament was more powerful than any cruiser. Their high speed enabled them to outrun battleships. The 1919 Treaty of Versailles had drastically restricted the German Navy in both the size of its ships and its number. Thus, when Hitler came to power, he had to virtually create a modern navy from scratch. He was forced to accept that Germany would be unable to match the Royal Navy in firepower. So, his small battle fleet was designed for another purpose. Hitler recognized that Britain's survival depended on her maritime trade. Throttle this, and she could be starved into submission, as had almost happened in the spring of 1917 at the hands of German U-boats. Thus, in August 1939, on the eve of war, he gave orders for his Navy to prepare for action against British merchant shipping. The then slender force of U-boats was dispatched to waiting positions around the British Isles and in the Atlantic. In addition, Graf Spee and Deutschland were deployed to holding areas in the North Atlantic. 49-year-old Hans Langsdorff, a naval officer of the old school, commanded Graf Spee. She left Wilhelmshaven 10 days before the outbreak of the war. Neither Graf Spee nor Deutschland were immediately committed to action. On September 7, 1939, Langsdorff was ordered to take Graf Spee to a waiting area in the South Atlantic. This was off Pernambuco, Brazil. Deutschland was simultaneously instructed to cruise off Greenland. Graf Spee reached her position on the 12th of September, but received no further orders during the next 2 weeks. Finally, on September 26, 1939, the order came. Langsdorff was given permission by the German Naval Headquarters to begin operations against merchant shipping in the South Atlantic and Indian Oceans. Hitler had, however, issued express orders to avoid hostile warships. Langsdorff was warned again 3 days later not to expose his ship to the risk of a full naval battle. On September 30th, the day after his second warning, Graf Spee had her first success. She spotted a merchant vessel, the British steamship Clement, off the Brazilian coast. When she tried to make a run for it, Langsdorff sent up his seaplane to stop her. As Graf Spee approached, the Clement's crew abandoned her, but not before transmitting a distress call. Langsdorff then sank the vessel, but radioed Pernambuco to inform the authorities that the crew needed rescuing. This message, like that from the Clement, was picked up by Allied listening stations. These two signals were the first warnings that the British and French received regarding a surface raider at large in the South Pacific. This was troubling, since the merchant ships here were sailing on their own. Only in the North Atlantic and home waters were merchant vessels organized in escort convoys. Everywhere, single vessels would be easy prey for German raiders. The French and British naval authorities began to organize task groups to hunt down the Graf Spee. These were Force L, built around a carrier and a battle cruiser. Force F, with 2 cruisers in the Caribbean. Force X, with 2 French cruisers at Dakar. Force H, with 2 cruisers in Simonstown. Force K, with a carrier and battle cruiser sent out from Britain to operate from Freetown. Force Y, with a battleship and cruiser off Brazil. And finally, Force G, made up of 4 cruisers and based on the Falkland Islands in the South Atlantic. While these forces were being deployed, Graf Spee steamed toward the coast of Africa. On October 5th, she intercepted another ship, the SS Newton Beach. Further successes followed during the next few days. Langsdorff now rendezvoused with his supply ship, the Altmark, transferring prisoners and ship's cargoes and taking on more fuel. He received information that the British were rerouting ships and decided to move into the Indian Ocean in the hope of more pickings there. Both Langsdorff and the German Naval Headquarters had become aware of the Allied naval forces being deployed to the South Atlantic. He was instructed to leave the Atlantic as soon as he felt threatened by their naval buildup. The Germans hoped that a move into the Indian Ocean would also create a useful diversion. On the same day that Langsdorff received these new orders, he sank another vessel and steamed south. After meeting the Altmark again, Graf Spee rounded the Cape of New Hope to its south, but a spell of bad weather denied her further success. The seaplane that Graf Spee carried to help locate victims now developed a fault. It was not until November 14th, when he was off the coast of Madagascar, that Langsdorff managed to sink another vessel, Africa Shell. Langsdorff realized that the British were rerouting their ships to avoid Graf Spee. He now became impatient with his lack of victims. His ship's engines were also giving him problems, so he decided to return to the South Atlantic. This potentially foolhardy decision was to seal Graf Spee's fate.
Great blunders in history will return in a moment.
The rules for making money have changed. Pinstripes, wingtips, that's not how it works anymore. Anybody can be the next big wheel, as long as they put their money in a better place. Welcome to the new Old Boys Club. Less old, less boys. Morgan Stanley, move your money, get well connected.
If only all metal were Flexon. Flexon eyewear has the ability to bend and spring back to shape. Couldn't everyone use more Flexon in their lives? Flexon eyewear, they're just amazing. Durable, comfortable, and lightweight. The best thing is, this is real. Just amazing stuff. Flexon eyewear by Marchand.
Mom? Dad?
You are miserable parents. I snuck out. You caught me.
I lied. You knew.
I pushed.
And you pushed back.
Invaded my privacy.
My privacy.
I hated it.
I hated you.
Why couldn't you leave me alone?
Just leave me alone.
I thought you were the worst parents in the world.
I thought you were the worst parents in the world.
Thanks.
Tonight on the History Channel. MASH comes under fire when History vs. Hollywood looks at Korea's mobile army surgical hospitals. Then it's the story of justice in the armed services in military police, followed by air shows from barnstorming to Blue Angels on Modern Marvels. It all begins tonight at 8 on the History Channel.
They're the people you thought you knew and the people you want to know more about. The all-new Biography Channel. Step out of your life and into the lives of movie stars and moguls, from their most dramatic on-screen performances to the untold drama of their lives.
Every night, you could live another life.
Movies, biographies, and documentaries, 24 hours a day. The Biography Channel. Call your cable operator or satellite provider.
The History Channel now returns to Great Blunders in History.
Having decided to risk re-entering the South Atlantic, Captain Langsdorff was confident that if he did meet Allied warships, the Graf Spee's guns would be more than a match for them. In their pursuit of Graf Spee, the Allies had sent warships into the Indian Ocean to hunt her down. When Langsdorff returned to the South Atlantic, the area was temporarily clear. With his seaplane now repaired, Langsdorff was able to locate and destroy 2 more merchant vessels. After taking the second ship's crew on board, the Germans learned from her papers of an assembly point for merchant ships off the River Platte. Hungry for more victims, Graf Spee made for this tempting target. The nearest Allied warships to the Platte were those of Force G, based on the Falkland Islands. Commodore Henry Harwood, who was in charge, had 2 of his 4 cruisers constantly patrolling off the River Platte and Rio de Janeiro. The other two cruisers were refurbished in the Falklands before relieving those on patrol. On December 2nd, Harwood set sail in HMS Ajax. He intended to relieve HMS Cumberland, which was off the mouth of the Platte River and badly in need of an overhaul. As for his other ships, HMS Exeter was completing some repairs in the Falklands. And the New Zealand cruiser Achilles was off Rio de Janeiro. Within the next 24 hours, Harwood received 2 signals which confirmed the sinking of Graf Spey's latest 2 victims. Harwood concluded that the German ship had 3 options: the Falkland, the River Platte, and Rio de Janeiro. The distance between each of them was 1,000 miles. Harwood, therefore, had only one chance to intercept the raider. He decided to gamble on the River Platte and ordered Exeter and Achilles to meet him there on December 10th. Meanwhile, Langsdorff received intelligence from Germany that a small British convoy was scheduled to leave the Uruguayan port of Montevideo. Eager for action, he decided to intercept it, unaware that the Platte was the meeting point for Harwood's cruisers. Langsdorff's officers were apprehensive about the risk of meeting Allied warships off the Platte, but he overruled them. By December 12th, Graf Spey was off its mouth and eagerly awaiting her prey. The British cruisers met and were anxious to see if their gamble would pay off. Harwood's main problem was that his combined firepower fell well short of Graf Spey's 11-inch guns. Ajax and Achilles were armed only with 6-inch guns, while the German ship also